Thank you for downloading this Brum Radio podcast. For more podcasts, visit brumradio.com.
And now, for your listening pleasure, it's the Brum Picture Show, brought to you by Brum Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Brum Picture Show, the weekly film show brought to you by Birmingham-based community cinema collective Screen B14. On this week's show, we're going to be journeying into the wasteland. No, not Birmingham city centre, but Australia, of course, to celebrate the release of the latest film in the Mad Max franchise, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. We're going to be talking about one of the most bonkers film franchises of all time.
Woo!
Mad Max. My name is Paul Vernon, and unfortunately, things are a little quiet in the studio today. I'm afraid to say that some of my Screen B14 colleagues have been seduced by the wasteland and the opportunities to seize power within. Our regular contributor, Rory Rawson, in his hubris, has decided to venture off into the desert to found the settlement Rorytown, but unfortunately got into a violent conflict with Screen B14's Supreme Overlord Ben Thomas's rival settlement, Bensville, in a dispute over the control of male grooming products. The last I heard, Rory was being used as Ben's blood bag, strapped to the hood of a monster truck, hurtling through the desert at 100 miles an hour. So needless to say, they're a bit busy. However, I am delighted to say that there is one member of Screen B14 too headstrong and powerful to be dragged into petty squabbles over resources. She's the Brum Picture Show's very own Furiosa, the fearsome filmmaker and my cunning collaborator, the great Auntie Nadine.
I am Furiosa! No, I'm Nadine.
Hi Nadine, how's it going?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
I haven't been seduced into the wasteland.
No.
Thankfully.
You're too strong-minded and strong-willed. You're not weak like Ben and Rory.
Exactly. I'm going to be setting up my own matriarchy back at base camp, basically, while the, men warlord it about.
Yeah, strapping each other to cars
Exactly.
and just, I hope Rory's got enough blood.
He was looking rather pale last time I saw him.
Well, anyway, thanks for joining me, Nadine. Now, I believe we have some hate mail to start us off on the show this week.
As the Emperor himself said, good. Let the hate blow through you. This is from Skip Davis.
Oh, that guy.
Good morning, sports fans. Tuned into your latest available podcast and was bemused to hear Nadine, a veritable film and genre buff, fall into the easy, it's a trap, of labelling Star Wars as sci-fi. I'm just a caveat. I do believe I mentioned that it was science fantasy at least once.
At least once. I'd say at least 2 or 3 times.
Exactly.
You were quite clear about it.
But anyway.
Okay.
It's, if anything, a space opera, and Big Daddy George himself refers to it as the hero's journey in space. Fantasy films for kids. The Force is magic. Nothing to do with science, and that's where the focus lies. Simple good versus evil, baddie versus goodie, who embrace pureness and the light to wield the good magic, redeem bad dad, and destroy maniacal space sorcerer Emperor Dude. Just being set in space, a sci-fi film does not make. That was a very Yoda-esque delivery. I'm frankly shocked.
Did he put that?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Don't stoop to his level.
Sorry. I'm frankly shocked at such a rookie mistake. As you can tell, I don't really have any strong feelings about this at all, but thought it best to politely correct the genre label. Much love, Skipples.
A lengthy
it's
rebuttal.
a lot to unpack, but I think fundamentally wrong on many levels, especially this idea that the Force is magic, nothing to do with science, and that's where the focus lies. One word for you, Skipples, midichlorians.
Yeah, can't get more scientific than midichlorians, can you?
Exactly. Ha.
Idiot.
And to anyone who, despises the fact that midichlorians, came up in the prequels, it actually was one of George's original ideas from the 70s. So sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. It's canon.
canon.
The Force is scientific.
That's right. So hold your tongue, Skip. Do not be questioning the expertise of Nadine
And remember,
with your waffle.
fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. So, think about that before you send us some hate mail, please.
Yeah, Skip.
It's got robots in it and spaceships. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
How much more sci-fi do you want to get?
Exactly. So we reject your hypothesis, Skip.
Exactly. Sorry.
Is that it for the emails? There we go. Skip again. Well, thanks. Please do email us at pictureshow@brumradio.com if you want to add to this discourse in any way. Now it is time for the news section. Nadine, anything caught your eye in the news this week?
Yes, some Spielberg news.
Oh.
Apparently, his next film will be a UFO movie based on his own idea, and the project now has a 2026 release date.
Oh. Any more information on that? Did you say who it was written by?
David Koepp.
Yes.
It was written by David Koepp, who's worked with Spielberg previously
Yeah.
on Jurassic Park, War of the Worlds, and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Oh, that'll have people clamoring to watch it.
Yeah.
And he wrote Panic Room as well. Great film.
I
script.
wouldn't know. I haven't seen it.
You've not?
I'll take your word for
David
it.
Fincher, Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart, very young Kristen Stewart, panicking in a room. It's good.
Your idea of a good Friday night.
Absolutely. Well, that's quite exciting news. Because Senor Spielbergo's last film, I don't think was a favourite of either of ours, was it? We liked it, but it was.
Rory enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, Rory loved it,
and it was very
There's no accounting for taste.
personal.
Yes.
It's a very personal film.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I believe George Miller has said that the end shot of that film is one of his faves.
Okay.
He really, really enjoyed that shot, I think.
Oh, well, there you go. Tying into our Mad Max theme this week. But yeah, I'm glad to see Stevie going back to some aliens and stuff. I like aliens.
Yeah.
I like it when Steven Spielberg depicts aliens on screen.
You're assuming that it's going to be an alien film. I mean, it says UFO. It could be a whole
That's true. It could
government conspiracy type.
Yeah, it could just be the Chinese.
Hard-hitting the Chinese.
The Chinese, they reckon that the Chinese might be a lot of the UFOs. It's the Chinese who've got this technology that people,
okay.
all the Tic Tacs and stuff, the Tic Tac UFOs that have been all the rage.
No.
Really? You've not heard about that? Okay, so they got actual footage of these Tic Tac shaped UFOs, and basically the Pentagon turned around and said, yep, they're real. Basically, the US government has admitted aliens are real, and everyone's just like, so what? We got other stuff going on, mate. Don't really care.
I know. To be honest, they found some alien corpse in Mexico or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure that was part of it.
I know, but I was just, when it all came out, I was just like, we've just been through a pandemic. I just don't think I could deal with aliens like that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that seems to be the public consciousness because, pretty much, the government have said there is stuff in the skies that we don't know what they are, and that's pretty crazy. But everyone's just so unfazed. They're just like, yeah, okay,
well,
whatever.
Have you seen the cost of living lately?
Do you think we care about aliens?
Fish to fry.
Okay, well, that's some news. Other news. So obviously the Cannes Festival has been happening recently, and of course the only thing we really care about in the Cannes Festival is the Palm Dog.
It is,
which is, of course, the big award ceremony where they celebrate the finest dogs in film. Now, of course, last year, Missy the dog from Anatomy of the Fall became a superstar and swept the board at the Palm Dog. But this year, there is a new dog that has taken the title.
No.
I know, it's very sad. So apparently this year, the Palm Dog has been given to Cody, which is the senior stray at the heart of Swiss-French comedy Dog on Trial. So it seems that Cannes are really into legal dramas and dogs combined. So that's nice. So apparently Cody is a blonde Griffon cross. I've not actually heard of that breed. But yeah, he plays Cosmos, an aggressive pet who's taken on as a client by a defense lawyer in a story exploring the status of dogs in society. So that's nice. And Cody apparently is nearing his 10th birthday and will soon retire from acting. And this is how...
Well, he's going out on a high.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is how Variety phrases it. He's bow-wowing out. Having delivered a fine four-legged swan song. So yeah, that's some good dog-related news. And apparently the Palm Dogs Grand Jury Prize went to Xin, the Jack Russell Greyhound Cross in Black Dog, which is from Chinese director Guan Hu. And that film apparently stars Taiwanese actor and singer Eddie Peng as a man charged with removing stray dogs from his hometown before the Olympic Games. But fear not, Messi fans, Messi's career is still going strong. And a year on, Messi's still appearing at the awards ceremonies. So he was there at the red carpet before Cannes' opening night of the second act. And he was there ahead of the likes of Meryl Streep and Greta Gerwig. Now, apparently, the festival usually has a strict protocol restricting four-legged access for emotional support dogs only. But Variety hears that Messi was given special dispensation as he was recording scenes for a French TV comedy show, and it was not considered a red carpet operation. And apparently, one festival insider noted that Messi was better behaved than most people on the red carpet and would be welcomed back any day. So that's good. That's nice to hear. Messi, the dog, is still working and still appearing at those celebrity galas. So I'm quite happy about that.
Yeah, just let's hope Messi doesn't go off the rails.
Yes.
Well, all that fame.
Yeah. So there we go. So that's that's the most important news to come out of Cannes, is that a new
well,
Palm
I'm going to
Dog.
have to take your word for that, Paul.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Or have you heard any other news from Cannes?
No.
Yeah, that's all I've heard.
Okay.
So there we go. We must, before we move on, we must address this, because regular listeners will have been eagerly awaiting an update on the Pooniverse.
Will they?
Yes. So of course, if you were listening a few episodes ago, you'll remember Ben breaking the news that the Pooniverse, the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey extended universe.
Are we allowed to say that at this time?
What, Pooniverse?
Yeah.
Well, we've said it before.
Okay.
We'll say it again. I think we can say Pooniverse. So yes, there's been an update on this extended Pooniverse from the makers of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And they have unveiled their plans for Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. And apparently this will feature Martin Portlock playing an evil, murderous and disfigured version of the children's character. It will follow Wendy Darling as she strikes out in an attempt to rescue her brother Michael from the clutches of the evil Peter Pan. And along the way, she will meet Tinkerbell, who in this version of the story will be seen taking heroin, convinced that it's pixie dust.
Not PCP?
No, they're not that clever.
That would have made more sense.
Yeah, they're not that clever. They're just heroin. So that's nice. And then apparently they've announced a few more things.
Hit me with it.
Well, apparently, so this isn't strictly Pooniverse. This is from Jagged Edge's Twisted Childhood universe, of which Pooniverse is a subset.
It's just one.
It's just one franchise within a franchise. So yeah, we've got apparently coming up to look forward to, or dread, if you will, Pinocchio Unstrung, set to be an extremely unique and R-rated depiction of Pinocchio.
Okay.
And Bambi the Reckoning, in which the innocent deer is turned into a revenge-seeking killing machine. That's also due out this year. And then in 2025, filming is due to start on Pooniverse Monsters Assemble.
Okay.
An Avengers Infinity War style crossover, bringing together Pooh, Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Bambi, Tinkerbell, and various other beloved children's characters.
All the out-of-copyright children's characters, basically.
Exactly. So there you go. That's your update, guys.
Exciting. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to it.
Cannot wait.
Excellent.
We're doomed. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and this week we are talking about Mad Max. That's right.
The whole blooming saga.
The whole blooming saga. Because yes, of course, Furiosa is out now. We've seen it. So Nadine and I thought to ourselves, you know what? Let's watch all the Mad Max films and let's talk about them. So that's what we're going to do today. So of course, Mad Max, you know Mad Max. It is the franchise that put Mel Gibson and Australia on the map. So, of course, Mad Max is the post-apocalyptic franchise directed by George Miller.
Dr. George Miller.
Dr. George Miller, who, of course, has had a fascinating career. So, yes, as Nadine mentions, he started out as a doctor, and then he made 3 Mad Max films, and then followed it up with, of course, Babe and Happy Feet. Films about talking animals, as you do. And he also threw in the Witches of Eastwick for good measure. And then, 30 years later, he decided to make some more Mad Max films. So what a career. He's just a fascinating chap. It's an absolutely bonkers franchise, and it's a really interesting one to talk about. They're very much centered around vehicular action. In the original trilogy, it stars Mel Gibson, and he is Max Rockatansky.
It's got to be one of the best character names of all time, surely.
It's incredible. It's incredible. He's a cop, and then some tragic stuff happens to him, and then he turns into Mad Max and just becomes a broken figure wandering around the Australian wasteland. It takes place in a world where there's been some kind of oil crisis. There's been some nuclear business going on, and basically...
Well, not yet. This is one of the disputed aspects of the films and the chronology. And you'll find that it's one of those franchises where the chronology is really kind of iffy.
Mm-hmm. There is very little continuity with the films, and like that's
almost none at all.
Yeah, you've got like the same actors turning up as different characters. You've got like certain characters being dropped. You've got certain bits being rewritten. So there's a general fan theory out there that the whole point of the Mad Max films is that they're folk tales, they're fairy tales, and they're just retellings of people remembering the legends of Max. So that's why there's absolutely no continuity between most of the films.
That's a good excuse, isn't it?
It is. It's
all mythology.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that some people say that the nuclear sort of winter happened between films 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. And then some say it happened later on, I think.
And then some say none of them are related to each other in any way. It's just...
Yeah.
It's just
so
Mad
it's
Max.
kind of pick your own adventure, really.
Yeah, which is good. It means you can kind of do what you want with it. So apparently George Miller was inspired to make Mad Max after the oil crisis in 1973 in Australia. So there was a big hoo-ha about oil, and then things started kicking off. And apparently it took 10 days during this oil crisis in Australia for the first shot to be fired, and it wasn't shot at anyone. It was shot into the air because someone had cut in line apparently to get the oil. And George Miller thought to himself, well, if a shot's being fired on day 10, I wonder what things will be like by day 100. And he kind of ran with that idea. And of course, working as a doctor, he'd seen a lot of vehicular accidents and became fascinated with, just the dangers of cars. So that was something very much on his mind, what he'd seen in his medical career, and transposing that onto screen, just going, cars are pretty dangerous, And oh my goodness, making a Mad Max film sounds pretty dangerous. I suppose we should start with the first film.
The first movie is an Ozploitation movie, isn't it?
Yes, it is part of the Ozploitation movement.
So what is Ozploitation, Paul? Because if you've listened to the show before, Paul references a lot of Ozploitation films.
Well, Ozploitation is basically Australian exploitation films.
That was quite simple, wasn't it? Wasn't it, Mike?
Wasn't it, mate? So
Mate.
There you go. But yeah, the history of Ozploitation is a fascinating one indeed. So there wasn't really much of a Australian film industry in the early days, and then one of the ways that Australian film production kind of started to take off again was through the making of lots of trashy genre flicks, and it was these Ozploitation films. that would go on to kind of break Australia to the world stage. So there was lots of things that were influential on George Miller himself. So there was Stone from 1975, which is about a marauding biker gang. And then there were just all sorts of absolutely bonkers films. Like a lot of the earlier Ozploitation stuff were pretty much sexploitation films. So they were starring Barry Humphries, who we all know as Dame Edna. He was involved in a lot of those. And it was...
I can't quite picture that.
I know, it's amazing to think about, but they were quite popular, much to the disappointment of the Australian government, who were trying to stop people making these kind of, trashy base films and make arty stuff like, Picnic at Hanging Rock and all that kind of stuff. But people really liked all this exploitation stuff,
Well, that's a real understatement, because the first Mad Max movie is the most profitable film of all time until the Blair Witch Project in 1999.
Really? Oh, I did not know that. That is an interesting factoid.
It made 100 million on a pretty much shoestring budget.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, because they made it for,
Beans.
Made it for beans because they shot it illegally, which helped. So they just did proper guerrilla filmmaking. They just closed down roads themselves and just cleared up after themselves, and then just did what they want. Really, apparently, the producer Byron Kennedy would just have this kind of fake permit that he just flashed to the authorities whenever anyone asked him what they were doing. Yeah, it's just like, we're supposed to be here, mate. There we go.
Well, it was really, when we say it was on a shoestring, I mean, George cut this film in his kitchen himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, it just goes to show the power of cinema, Nothing budget movie that you made, that you cobble together in your kitchen, becomes the most profitable film of all time.
Yeah. That's remarkable. Yeah, that's an amazing stat, that is. But yes, the first film is an interesting one. So yeah, as Nadine says, it is more of a part of it.
I would say it's the most different of all the Mad Max films because it's so green.
Exactly.
It's not even in the... I mean, what do you think of when you think of Mad Max? You think desert, you think tyres, you think mad people in leather outfits,
exactly,
crazy hairstyles and weapons, and we don't really get any of that in the first one. We get some leather. There's a bit of leather.
That's the thing. Mad Max is not very Mad Maxy.
It's a contradiction, really.
It's an interesting one because for all accounts, it kind of takes place in the real world. Like society is broadly functioning. There's there's a police force, there's restaurants, there's nightclubs, and there's even like a legal court system.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole plot point that is about one of the biker gang getting away with it because of his lawyers, because no witnesses turning up and his lawyers just basically getting him off on a technicality. And that is not a thing that would happen in the later Mad Max films. So,
they've eaten all the lawyers.
Yeah, this one is quite restrained, really, and it's quite unusually structured as well. So it basically opens with the third act of a previous film that we just never see. So it opens with a climactic chase sequence with Max chasing the Knight Rider, and then it just like the middle of the film. He tries to live the quiet life with his wife
and kid,
and then the tragedy in his life that turns Max into Mad Max doesn't really happen until the end of the film. So it's kind of ostensibly a revenge film where the main thing that Max wants revenge for doesn't even happen till the end of the first film in the franchise.
He walks around in a shirt and some khaki pants at one point.
Yeah, exactly.
Some chinos.
Yeah. Just
so
having a nice time.
Yeah.
It's very odd.
It's not what you're expecting.
No, that's for sure. So I can understand why some people would be underwhelmed by the first Mad Max film because a lot of people would have seen the other ones first because it didn't really get a wide release in the States, Mad Max. So for a lot of people, Road Warrior, the second film, was their first introduction to Max, and then they didn't get to see the original until later on. And compared to the later films in the franchises, the first one is just basically a quiet art house film.
And when it was released in America, it was apparently dubbed into American English.
Yes, which is an incredible fact, isn't it? So, yeah.
It wasn't even Mel Gibson's voice. It was somebody else. I mean, Mel Gibson was fresh out of film school. So this is the film that really propelled him into, the megastar he became.
Yeah.
And this franchise. So, yeah, he was like 22 years old, I think, when he made the first one. He was just a nobody.
Yeah. And then this kind of launched him along with a film called Tim, apparently. Yeah. Apparently, most of the extras were paid in beer as well.
And it shows.
And most of the biker gang extras were members of actual Australian outlaw motorcycle clubs, which must have been interesting to wrangle on set.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
it is, when we say it's an exploitation movie, I mean, it is. It's an exploitation movie. There's nudity, there's sex, there's violence. It's what you would expect from an exploitation movie. And it's interesting to see how it evolved with each movie. So if you like your exploitation, definitely check it out. But if you like the kind of fantastical element of the Mad Max universe, you might be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah. But regardless, like, this is the film that like sets the groundwork of what it's going to be in terms of just being a very stunt-focused franchise. And there's just some incredible some of the car chase sequences in this. You are just like, poof. That's impressive that everyone was okay in the end. Because there's this
good job there was a doctor on set.
Yeah. Cheers, Dr. George. But yeah, so there's a shot where a stunt rider comes off their bike and then the wheel like hits him in the back of the head, and there's no way they planned that. That's just what happened. But
apparently
of course,
he had blood coming out of his nose and ears.
Yeah, that's to be expected, really. So
but
yeah,
he was okay.
He was all right, and of course they used that shot in the film, and they even use it again in the Road Warrior in the flashbacks sequences, getting their money's worth out of that one. But anyway, so yeah, the first Mad Max, somewhat subdued when you think of the rest of it, but definitely worth checking out. But then, of course, I'd say when Mad Max really becomes Mad Max is in 1981 when The Road Warrior was released.
Yeah, no, this is what I'd call or what George Miller would call a Western on wheels.
Ah, yes.
So we're moving out of the exploitation territory, and it is a step up visually, cinematically. I mean, it's actually lit, I think.
Yes.
You can see they're using lighting, the cinematography involved. I think, on the first film, it really was cheap as chips, and I think they only had like a couple of lenses that Peter Weir had left behind or something that, barely worked.
Yeah.
But on this one, you can see the budget has increased and the cinematic language has evolved. And it very much, the original trilogy very much reminds me of the Evil Dead trilogy in that the way that series of films evolve. So the first one is a kind of exploitation film, the made on the cheap film that was sort of cobbled together in a kitchen and funded by doctors and dentists. And then you've got the second film, the more ambitious one, that's kind of like a soft reboot of the first one that kind of, explores some of the same territory but is kind of bigger. And then you have the third one, which we'll get into later, which sort of goes off into kind of even more sort of fantastical fantasy territory and gets a bit medieval. But yeah, Mad Max 2.
Or just The Road Warrior.
Yeah. I mean, Max appears, he's another Evil Dead sort of weird crossover. He's got a white streak of hair in the second one.
Yeah.
Or like... Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a thing in the 80s.
Yeah.
I suppose that's to show that he's seen some stuff.
Yeah, he has a traumatic experience.
He's had a traumatic experience. But this is where we get deserty.
Very deserty. There's no greenery going on.
No. So we're in the desert and he's got an animal sidekick.
He does.
He's got a little dog.
There's an Australian cattle dog.
Yeah. Apparently a cross between a dingo and some other kind of dog.
Wow.
And the dog is called Dog.
What a great name.
And the dog actually came from a pound
Oh.
and was about to be destroyed.
Oh.
And they adopted it for the movie and trained it for the movie. And then the dog was adopted by a crew member also named Max.
Oh, that's sweet, isn't it?
On a farm chasing chickens.
Oh, did he go to any award ceremonies first?
I've no idea, Paul.
I hope so.
But for all the dog fans out there.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And it's a fine dog as well. But yes, I do love the Road Warrior because, as I said, this is where Max becomes truly Mad Max, because it seems in the first film everything's kind of reasonably normal. You know, you got marauding biker gangs, but society's all right.
I mean, that's just Australia, really, isn't it?
Exactly. But it seems that society in this universe, if we are taking it in actual kind of canonical continuity, society collapses pretty darn quickly, because we go from, you know, restaurants and things like that to Lord Humongous, King of the Wasteland. And everyone suddenly, apparently this is what happens in the post-apocalypse, everyone gets really into performance art and S&M gear.
Yeah, and there's a lot of leather daddies in this one.
There's a lot of very homoerotic stuff going on.
I mean, I have to say...
Very progressive.
Well, no.
Oh, right. Well, it is for the time.
I was going to say, I have to say, that's something that's always been part of the Mad Max universe. There's definitely some queer-coded, well, I wouldn't even say coded, bad guys in the first one. I mean, there's a man walking around in chaps, and you can see his bum.
His bum?
His bum is there. So, you know, the costumes are really out there.
The costume department go overboard in this.
Yeah.
Well, not overboard. They just do their job spectacularly.
The costume designer was really involved in the punk scene at the time. So you get these kind of punk rock BDSM biker gang.
And there's also one girl who, as Nadine pointed out.
Oh, yeah. It looks like she's about to do some aerobics.
Yeah. She's just got the white tennis sweatband on, and then a ponytail just kind of up in a vertical. Yes.
Yeah, it's very, very... The good guys are wearing white, which, quite frankly, is the most impractical colour to wear in the desert.
Practicality doesn't really enter into it in the Mad Max universe.
Well, it just seems, you know, if you're living in a post-apocalyptic society in the desert... You're not going to want to wear white. That's going to be there's red dirt everywhere. It's going to be a nightmare. I didn't see one laundry tent in that film.
Where are they getting their DAS from?
Exactly. But then the bad guys, it's all studded leather, chaps, ski masks before Friday the 13th. Really
exactly.
Champion the ski mask. So it's really kind of out there, but it's very, in that way, and I think this is something that George has done throughout the whole saga, is it's very clear these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. He's always said that he wants the films to be able to be read without subtitles. You know, if this film was playing in Japan, you know, and these films were very big in Japan, they saw Max as a samurai type figure. He wanted people to understand it without having to read. So, Mel Gibson only has about 20 lines of dialogue in this film.
Yeah.
So he's very, you know...
He's not very wordy as Max.
No, he's not that kind of guy. He's an iconic character. He's a sort of a figure, like a Western cowboy hero who kind of just wanders into town and wanders off again.
But and that is very much, that character is cemented in the Road Warrior, and it's here that the Mad Max franchise becomes the Mad Max franchise. Although, I would say, Mad Max isn't really that mad, is he? Like, relatively
Not
speaking,
really.
he's probably the sanest person in the Mad Max universe.
Well, is it mad as in insane, or is he mad as in angry?
I mean, he's not even that angry. He doesn't really, he doesn't really lose it that often.
I guess it just goes well with Max, doesn't it?
It sounds better than moderate Max.
Yeah.
Mild Max.
I mean, he does some mad stuff in the next one.
He certainly does.
So,
But still, compared to everyone else,
the whole world's pretty mad.
Max is quite normal, really.
Fits in quite well.
Exactly. Normal Max. But anyway.
Would normal Max have been one of the highest grossing, most profitable films of all time? Probably not.
Quite possibly not. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and today we are talking all things Mad Max. We've just discussed the first two films, Mad Max and Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, and now it is time for Beyond Thunderdome from 1985, and it's safe to say this is where the 80s really takes over the franchise. It's a very different beast indeed. So it's considered by some to be the best in the original trilogy. Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4, but it is fair to say considered by most to be the worst.
Well, whereas the first Mad Max film was an exploitation film, and the second one was a Western on wheels. This is like a kids' action adventure movie.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I remember it like this is when I think of Mad Max, I'm thinking of this movie. I think it's probably something I watched on telly as a kid. And it has a lot of the hallmarks that we associate with Mad Max, including, you know, mad hairstyles, even more crazy outfits.
Yep.
We've got our first glimpse of a proto-war boy. Got a young lad in white body paint with black rings around his eyes.
Yeah.
And we get our first sort of glimpses of the apocalypse or poxyclips,
Yes.
as it's called in this film. So we get a bit more information on sort of why the world has descended so quickly into madness.
But not lots more.
But little sort of like half-remembered fables told by children. But yes, this is where we really start getting into fantasy territory. And I have to say it's a lot of fun.
It is fun.
It's a lot of fun.
It's very silly.
I mean, Thunderdome itself is this kind of gladiatorial dome in which, you know, two men enter, one man leaves.
Yeah, classic.
And Tina Turner is like the empress of this Bartertown.
Bartertown, yep.
Yeah, and it's kind of, there's something almost Gilliam-esque. I think.
Well, in that first sequence especially, yeah.
And it is just bigger. It's way more epic than the first two.
It is, but not in terms of action. Because it's an interesting one, because this starts out with Max getting to Bartertown and then getting involved in the Thunderdome. So it starts out with kind of 45 minutes of very actiony stuff, but again, not very vehicular-y. It's more people punching each other. And then for the middle section of the film, it just turns into Hook.
Yeah, there's definitely a kind of Lost Boys sort of gang of kids that he sort of adopts along the way. Yeah,
because basically he comes across a crashed 747, which is occupied by the descendants of the survivors of that wreckage, and they've started their own kind of Lost Boys or Lord of the Flies or what have you kind of society. And then the film kind of just slows down in terms of the action for a bit. It's just Max kind of, hanging out.
He gets a haircut.
He hangs out with these kids. Doesn't have a food fight, I don't think. But
I have to say, does the maddest thing that I think he does in any of the films.
Oh, yeah.
He punches a teenage girl in the face, which I think is pretty mad.
That is
in
quite
both
mad.
senses of the word. So that's quite shocking.
That is quite shocking.
But Max doesn't like kids. He doesn't really like anybody.
No.
He's kind of out for himself until he gets dragged into an adventure and then has to help out. But he's not, the warmest of people.
No, very much so.
But I couldn't see that happening in a current. And it, like I said, I think what makes it weirder is it is this very much like kiddie type film for the most part. Whereas like maybe in Fury Road or something like that, you could almost like an R-rated version of Max. But this is...
Do you not remember the bit when Robin Williams punches one of the Lost Boys in the face?
No. But yeah, I think that's kind of Max at his maddest in both senses of the word.
I'll give you that. But yeah, so the film kind of slows down for a bit whilst he's kind of hanging out with these kids. And then the third act, we get back into what Mad Max is known for with the vehicular action, but this time with a train.
I know, it's very Back to the Future 3.
It is very Back to the Future 3. So yeah, there is action in here, but like it is probably, whilst it's the most epic in scale and in terms of kind of budget and
extras,
world building and all that kind of stuff, in terms of the action, it is kind of reined back from the
until sort
original
of the final act, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is a lot of fun. It is it is a fun film. It's more sanitized, it's more Hollywoodized, and it's a 15.
Yeah, no
UK.
Nudity in this one.
No nudity, no nothing. But don't be put off. It's still a really good experience.
For a lot of people, like I said, I must have watched this a bunch of times as a kid, and it is kind of what you think of when you think of Mad Max, because I'm certainly not thinking of like a cop in a very green, quite civilized part of Australia like in the first one. So this is kind of, this is what I think of. I think Tina Turner.
Yeah.
With the biggest hair so far.
Absolutely. And a little man on top of a big man.
Yeah.
Making one man called Master Blaster.
Well, that's something that we should get into, is the names of these characters.
Shall we do that now?
Go on.
Names in the Mad Max universe. There's some great ones. This only scratches the surface. We've got the Toe Cutter.
Yeah.
We've got Rictus Erectus. We've got the People Eater. We've got the Organic Mechanic.
I like that one.
We've got Splendid Angarad. We've got the Doof Warrior. We've got Scabarus Scrotus.
Are these character names or diseases?
Then we've got Lord Humongous, Auntie Entity, which is Tina Turner's character. We've got Pig Killer, and most recently we got Dr. Dementus. And that's just the start of them. They're so inventive, the names in the Mad Max universe. And we'll have to think of our own Brum Picture Show.
Yeah,
Mad Max names.
If you can think of any yourself, please do email us at pictureshow@brumradio.com. But yeah, so and that's the final of the original Mel Gibson Mad Max trilogy, and for many years that was the end.
Yeah.
That was it.
There was no more Max because, of course, George Miller had to go and make Babe.
And Happy
Feet, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I have to, as a quick aside, you've got to watch some interviews with George Miller talking about CGI. One of the cinematographers he'd worked with worked on Lord of the Rings, and he came back and showed him all the motion capture that they were doing with Gollum. And of course, George Miller's first instinct on seeing motion capture and that technology had come to existence, his first instinct was, holy cow, now we can make these penguins dance. And I love that that's where his mind went to first. It wasn't he eventually was like, oh yeah, we can probably apply this to Mad Max as well. But first things first, let's make these penguins dance. That's just wonderful. How wholesome.
I mean, it's, bonkers.
Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, for many years, Mad Max was dead. He had talked to Mel about doing another one. Mel had brought him over to Fox. They were going to do it at Fox. But Mel was very caught up in his Passion of the Christ directorial efforts. And apparently 9/11 happened.
Yeah, the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And that had something...
effect on the Australian dollar,
exactly.
which wasn't good news for Mad Max. And Mel Gibson sort of imploded.
Did he?
Not literally, but his career. So he wasn't really a bankable star anymore.
No.
So it seemed as if Max was dead. Until George thought, hang on, what if we recast Max? And they saw everybody. A lot of people wanted an Australian to carry on in the role. So Sam Worthington was a name that was thrown out there. Armie Hammer got very close. Armie Hammer
dodged a bullet there.
Yeah. Now this is probably one of my most favourite facts of all about Mad Max films. Eminem was considered for the role of Mad Max in Fury Road.
Really?
And apparently, one of the reasons that he didn't get it was that he didn't want to travel to Australia.
Really?
Yeah. George was working with Brittany Murphy on a film, and he asked her about Eminem. He just thought there was something interesting about him, and she said he was great. This is coming off the back of 8 Mile,
which he's very good in.
Yeah, and got a lot of critical notice for that. So it's not as insane as it sounds. But if anyone wants to do an AI version, an AI sort of face swap of Eminem as the Tom Hardy character in Fury Road, I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I just think that's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so Eminem didn't make the cut. Tom Hardy did. Apparently it was between Tom and Armie. And allegedly...
Armie tried to eat Tom Hardy.
No. Allegedly, Tom spat and sort of gnawed for some reason they did an audition together, which is really weird, I think.
That is weird.
Since they're going for the same character.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently Army was like, well, he obviously wants it more than me. And George said he saw something that he'd seen in Mel when he first met Mel, this kind of animal almost. He said they were a lot like animals in that they were kind of unpredictable. You didn't know, he had this soft side, but he also had this edge to him that George felt was really necessary for the character. But Fury Road would not be complete without Furiosa. Mm-hmm. And they looked at lots of people there too. But Charlize Theron won the part. And she's phenomenal. I mean, that character is so iconic. Mm-hmm. And it's really weird that it's a Mad Max movie, but Mad Max feels almost incidental. Well, I would say she's the real protagonist of this film.
Although I suppose Max in the other films is still kind of he's an outsider who just comes into other people's stories. So it's within keeping with the rest of the franchise in a way. But yeah, this is very much Furiosa's film.
Yeah. But yeah, so Charlize Theron came in, and it's really interesting because this film was voted by Empire magazine readers as the greatest film of the 21st century. So this is a film that's really loved by fans. It was critically acclaimed, nominated for 10 Oscars, was it? Won 6?
Oh, right, wow.
This, I mean, I can't overstate, this film was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director.
It was a phenomenon.
Yeah, and in a time when people complain that, big budget blockbuster movies, superhero movies and movies like Barbie don't get enough recognition, I mean, this really did get a lot of recognition. And it's a film that stars a woman with a disability in the lead role, sort of taking the shine away from the male who sort of started the series. And yet very few people sort of call it woke or in the way that people complained about Star Wars having a female lead and things like that, and Ghostbusters and so maybe it's just a really good movie and that's why people haven't complained as much. But it's really interesting to see that it's such a huge fan favorite film and yet it's quite progressive.
Indeed.
So progressive that Miller invited playwright Eve Ensler of the Vagina Monologues, to act as an on-set advisor. And she said she was impressed with the script's depth and what she saw as feminist themes. And she spent a week in Namibia where she spoke to the actors about issues of violence against women.
There we go.
And it is like, you can't really understate it. This is a film about a woman who tries to free a group of women from the patriarchy to establish a matriarchy in the desert. Yeah. So this is, it is, for all intents and purposes, a feminist movie.
Absolutely. Which is funny because apparently George Miller back in the days of the original Mad Max was saying, you couldn't have Max being played by a woman. You couldn't have that. And then decades on, basically, it is a female-led franchise.
Well, because the new film is all about Furiosa.
Indeed, and we'll get onto that shortly.
Yeah.
But like Fury Road is just a miracle as far as I'm concerned, because I think it's amazing that it ever got made, because as Nadine said, there are all sorts of problems with the pre-production. Then they tried to start filming it once in Australia, and then they'd had some freakish rain, and then so they turn up to film and everything's
green.
Everything's green with wildflowers growing everywhere. And then eventually they wound up going back to Namibia to finish it off, and then the producers pulled the plug because they were running over. They were like, no, you got to stop filming now. So they just hadn't filmed the beginning and the ending of the film, like all the Citadel stuff they just hadn't filmed. And then eventually, after they put a cut together of the middle section, the studio were like, okay, you can go and finish the film now. For such a tumultuous over 2-decade inception, for it to turn out how it did, it's nothing short of amazing. And I would say, genuinely, I do agree that it probably is the best action film ever, because I just think it is just stunning. But it's also possibly the only sequel that tarnishes the memory of the originals by being too good, because it is impossible to watch Fury Road and then go back to the original Mad Max films without thinking of them as just kind of the original ones as just kind of more prototypes for what was to come. It exceeds the originals so much that it just makes the originals look not quite so good, because it's just like, it's so impeccably put together, and it's just one of those things that you just like, how? There's this wonderful quote from Steven Soderbergh on seeing Fury Road, and he said, I just watched Mad Max Fury Road again last week. I tell you, I couldn't direct 30 seconds of that. I'd put a gun in my mouth. I don't understand how George Miller does that. I really don't. And it's my job to understand it. I don't understand two things. I don't understand how they're not still shooting that film. And I don't understand how hundreds of people aren't dead. Because that's the amazing thing. Because even though like George Miller started to embrace CGI and kind of digital technology with this film, it is still very much based on practical stunts, and his whole thing was that he wanted to make sure that the film obeyed the laws of gravity. So all this, they've got, you know, pole vaulting from vehicle to vehicle, that was all done for real. And it's just like some of the stunts in it, you're just like, bleh. Like, it must have been tedious to make. They'd spend a whole day setting up for a shot that's going to, you know, be in it for like a few seconds, and they didn't have a script. Like, the whole film was just meticulously storyboarded. So all the actors were there without a script, not knowing what's going on, and just getting increasingly frustrated with each other and George Miller. And then, Tom Hardy got into shouting matches with George Miller, and it wasn't till after he saw the film he was like, okay, it was brilliant. Well done.
That's one of the big stories behind this film is the feud between Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy, and I think their relationship on set seemed to mirror their relationship in the film, where they really didn't get along to begin with. I think they did make up in the end, but apparently Hardy was consistently late to set. And one day he arrived 3 hours late, and Charlize just had it, and she gave it to him verbally, and he sort of got up in her face, and she felt intimidated. So she asked to have a female producer on set with her at all time then. But they did make up in the end, and he apparently has since apologised. He just said he was in over his head. And he just and this was quite early in his career as well. This is kind of post Bronson, and this is just sort of, I think he filmed this before, or he was certainly hired for this before Inception came out. So it was quite a risk to cast him in this part. He wasn't, you know, a big Hollywood star at the time, and said it was very overwhelming. But George has said, you know, the conditions were pretty terrible. It was hot, it was dusty, you know. He says it's no surprise that people were a bit grumpy.
But it was all worth it in the end, because it is just one of the best films ever. And just the way it's put together, so many action films that are just impossible to follow what's going on with it, you know, the camera's moving too much, or there's just too many cuts or whatever. But every shot in this is obviously so meticulously constructed.
It was edited by George's wife, who's edited other films with him before, but she didn't feel confident to do it. I don't think she'd really done action before, and he said that was why she had to do it, because, you know, if you gave it to some guy, it would just look like every other action movie out there. So the editing in this is insane, and I have to say, the first time I attempted to watch it, I didn't get through it. I think it was just, I mean, it is a chase movie, and that's basically, it kind of reminds me of the Lord of the Rings, in how the first one is like, you know, you got the Fellowship of the Ring, which is kind of, we'll get into this later, but it's kind of Furiosa, whereas this is like, you know, Helm's Deep, you know, just big, just one long action sequence throughout. It does tie in with the first movie in a couple of interesting ways, though. The screenwriter, Nico Lathoris, is Grease Rat from the first Mad Max film. And he also went on to write Furiosa as well. And the actor playing Immortan Joe is Hugh Keys-Byrne, who is Toe Cutter in the first Mad Max film.
Go.
So it does tie up. Again, like you say, this is the weird thing about the Mad Max universe, where actors appear in roles unconnected from their original role that they first starred in.
Yes, lots of connective tissue.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd say, like I said, it was a bit confusing the first time I watched it, but having seen Furiosa, which we'll talk about in the reviews, and going back to watch Fury Road, it makes a lot more sense now. Honestly, because there isn't as much. It's weird because you said there wasn't a script, but he'd written the script for Furiosa. So that was the backstory that he gave to Charlize. So they do tie up very nicely in a lot of ways. So there are things that are briefly referenced in Fury Road that we see, in more detail in the prequel. But yeah, so having watched Furiosa now, I can go back to Fury Road and sort of know what's going on. Because like I say, they don't really tie into any of the previous movies at all. So it's very, it's very sort of hits the ground running and doesn't really stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, no, it doesn't stop. I mean, there's a few moments where it kind of breathes for a few seconds, but it is a 2-hour car chase.
Yeah.
And that was the vision that George Miller had. He just wanted to make, what if I made a Mad Max film that was just one long car chase? And that's what he did.
And he did it.
So yeah, it's an utterly relentless film. There's no fat to it whatsoever. It's, 2 hours of chasing through the desert, and it feels
fast-paced, high octane.
Yeah, and it feels like 90 minutes. So yeah, I love it. I love it. You are listening to the Brum Picture Show on Brum Radio, and we have been talking all things Mad Max today.
Good day.
That's right, mate. Because don't you know, Furiosa's just come out, which we are going to be reviewing now.
So yeah, there's quite a gap between this and Fury Road, and because of the gap in between, we have a new Furiosa. So George said he wasn't impressed with the de-aging technology as it is. And so he decided to recast the role of Furiosa. And because it sort of deals with her childhood and her teen years, that kind of makes a lot of sense. I would have loved to have seen at least a cameo of Charlize in this, because she really did make that role so iconic. And this, without any spoilers, this film leads directly into Fury Road. And for me, just that lack of continuity is kind of a little bit frustrating. I know none of the Max films really kind of add up together.
But this one definitely is the most linked to another in the franchise.
Yeah, so it just seems weird not to have at least had some kind of body double that looked a bit like Charlize, because we are dealing with a lot with her younger years. So I don't know. I felt that was an odd choice. But that aside, we have Anya Taylor-Joy taking over the role of Furiosa. We have Chris Hemsworth as the villain.
Having so much fun
with his prosthetic nose.
Yes, I think he's the only person to have ever had fun on a Mad Max set, because he was just saying like, he put it down to him being Australian apparently, that he could cope with the pressures of being on that set. So there you go. Good on you, Chris.
Yeah, and Anya does a really good job. She was recommended by Edgar Wright, who obviously worked with her previously.
Last Night in Soho.
Yeah, and George liked the fact that she had done ballet previously. Charlize was a ballet dancer. He said it made her very precise, and she was very determined. I do think she's a lot more slight than Charlize, and so I'm not as scared of her as I am of Charlize.
I'm saying I am. I'll still be scared of her.
I don't know. I feel like Charlize's Furiosa could definitely beat me up. I'm not 100% on Anya's. I love Anya. She's a brilliant actress.
Let's get Anya down to the studios.
Come on. Thunderdome. I'm up for it. I'm totally up for it. But in that way, she's not as intimidating, I think, as Charlize, which makes sense in the earlier, childhood and sort of teenage years. But as we go straight into Fury Road, I just think it doesn't quite work for me. This is, again, we're in another genre now, Paul. So we're in epic territory.
We certainly are.
And if you were unsure that we were in epic territory, Chris Hemsworth spells it out for us in one of the cheesiest lines in the film.
That was just made for the trailer, that line, wasn't it?
Have you got it in you to make it epic?
That's right. Have you?
I have to say as well, I totally understand why Chris was cast in this. He's a big movie star. He's Australian. He's beefy. He's got all those qualities. I don't think he's as iconic as some of the villains that we've seen previously.
Oh, really?
I don't think Dementus is no Immortan Joe. Sorry.
I'll give you that. But I think he's He's great.
He's having a lot of fun. And his character does evolve as the story goes along. But for me, I don't know. It just doesn't, he's not iconic for me. He's not like, a big bad. So that there's that disappointment. Tom Burke, however, who plays Praetorian Jack, I think was absolutely brilliant. Brilliantly cast. He does an Aussie accent and everything. He's a British actor. He does the Aussie accent. George didn't think he'd pull it off. He pulls it off. And I really like his character. And there's a lot going on there. I mean, with a lot of the other characters as well, there's a lot going on there that we don't know about, some kind of troubled past that we're not privy to. But I think, this could be a star-making term for Tom. He's been doing solid work in television for many years. He's been doing solid work in indie films like The Souvenir and True Things. And I think this could really bump him up to the next level, and well-deserved it will be too. And another actor to look out for, she's in the first part of the movie, Charlie Fraser, an Australian model and actress who plays Mary Jabassa. I just thought she was brilliant. I loved her. I wish we had more of her in the film. I really like the opening sequence. I won't give too much of the story away, but there's a chase. It's not on the level of Fury Road. It's more of a foot chase, and then it becomes a bike chase. And I really loved that. And I thought that was a great way to start the movie. But it does slow down a lot after that. And if you're looking for Fury Road 2, you're looking in the wrong place. This isn't that.
Well, yeah.
So this is a lot more, I mean, for me, in some ways, I think I preferred it in that it's a lot more character-based. There's a lot more story. You get more of the history. There's more world building. So I appreciated all of that. But if you're looking for something fast-paced, high-octane, adrenaline-fueled action, there is that, but not as much. It's not the main thrust of the film. So some people might be disappointed in that.
Well, yeah, so in many ways, it's almost the opposite of Fury Road, isn't it? So Fury Road was one long car chase, and this is an epic 15-year odyssey. It's a very different beast, and it's split into 5 chapters as well. So this is, very different structure, but it's still very much of the same piece aesthetically and thematically and everything, but it's just in terms of pacing. What's that smile? Go on.
I was going to just say, the chapter trope that he uses, I would argue, was inspired by Babe. Honestly, George was asked what his favourite shots from each of his films was, and he said that the chapter titles from the Babe movies were his favourite, and that it helped stitch together what was quite an episodic film. So I think he's taken stuff he's learnt from Babe and he's put it in this one.
That's right. It's amazing, isn't it? And it is definitely the longest in the franchise. So this is, almost 2.5 hours. And we don't really, because we follow very young Furiosa for quite a while, and we don't really see Anya Taylor-Joy until maybe an hour into the film. Like, it's a long time. But interestingly, going back to what you were saying, he was avoiding using de-aging technology. Did you know that they used AI to blend the faces? Because the transition between the young Furiosa and Anya Taylor-Joy is seamless, really. It's just like all of a sudden she's Anya Taylor-Joy and you don't really notice it happening. And that's apparently because they use this AI technology to slowly blend the face. So at the beginning, it's about 35% of Taylor-Joy's face on the young actress Brown, and then by the time Anya takes over, it's up to like 80%. So they've used some crazy technology to make those blur into one. So that's interesting.
Wonderfully.
Yeah, it really does, because his whole thing about saying not wanting to use de-aging technology is the fact that you're just seeing the technology, but you don't notice the technology here. It's just like, it is a seamless transition. So I thought that was really interesting. I absolutely loved it. You see things that you didn't get to see in the Mad Max universe before. You get to see Gas Town and Bullet Town and all that kind of stuff.
Some green.
Yeah, there's some green. There's some trees and stuff. It's perhaps not, I don't think it's as perfect a film as Fury Road, because for me, Fury Road is just perfect, because it's not quite as tight. And it's also, I'd say this one isn't quite as visually spectacular. There's some visual moments in Fury Road, like the bit when they're in the dust storm or whatever. There's nothing here that kind of reaches that level, but I think it is still absolutely gorgeous. I think a lot of people have been quite sniffy about the kind of digital sheen on this, but it's very much a stylistic choice, I think. And
I think people need to go back and rewatch Fury Road, because for all the you know, practical stunts in it, there is a lot of CGI. I'm sorry, there is. There's big storms. There's all sorts, loads of sand added, loads of composite shots.
Yeah. But that was the thing about kind of making it the blend between them quite seamless, but also it's still kind of noticeably, there's it's a cartoony kind of element to it, isn't it? Because you can definitely tell this isn't real world, doesn't look like this, but it's it just looks great, I think.
One thing that George did with Fury Road was he got fed up with the desaturated, post-apocalyptic world, so it just was so bright and colourful and orange and teal to the max.
Absolutely, put some colours in there.
Yeah, saturated.
Because that's the thing, because I don't think we mentioned this earlier, but it's like Mad Max just basically wrote the book on what post-apocalyptic was like, to influence, the Fallout video games and all that kind of stuff, and, Children of Men. The 2-pack video.
California Love. Do check it out. Yeah. California Love, but a little fun fact, was Jada Pinkett Smith, who was a big friend of Tupac, suggested he do a music video based on Mad Max, based specifically on Mad Max Thunderdome. And she was going to direct. In the end, Hype Williams directed it, but it is insane. So it's just the influence. It's such a huge cultural influence. It's become a byword whenever we talk about post-apocalyptic, times in the news or whatever. It's like, it's all gone Mad Max.
Yeah. Such an important franchise when you think about it, really. And I do think Furiosa is just such a wonderful addition to the canon, and it really leans into the fairy tale element as well. So there's little bits that reminded me of 3,000 Days of Years of Longing, I love that.
Do
film.
Check that out, because that's another George Miller film, very underrated, and all about fables as well. Storytelling.
Exactly. Yeah, so whilst it is the first film to have a kind of proper continuity with another in the franchise, it's still leaning into that kind of, this is all just people telling tales and we don't know what really happened.
Myth building. There's lots of there's references to Adam and Eve, there's references to the Odyssey. So it's really building up this myth of these characters and this world.
Absolutely. And I also loved, in terms of the world building, it features a character it features a couple of characters from the Mad Max video game. So there's Chumbucket, who is the mechanic who sorts out Max with his V8 in the video game version. He appears here very briefly. And then, of course, the Scabarus Scrotus is also a character from the video games. And if you're into your video games, then the Mad Max video game is possibly the best adaptation. The best adaptation of a film. To be fair, that's damning with faint praise, because there's not exactly lots of competition there, but it is a genuinely great game. And I implore you, if you like your games, play the Mad Max video game. And it's also apparently part of the canon of the Mad Max universe. So,
and if
there you go.
If you're going to see Furiosa, go and see it on the biggest screen possible. With the and we saw it in Dolby Sound, and it is a very, auditory experience. There's lots of. I genuinely went to bed after watching. I watched Furiosa and Fury Road back to back, and I couldn't sleep for the noise of engines revving, reverberating through my skull. It definitely is worth going to see on that big screen. And apparently it hasn't done as well as expected.
No,
it's been released at the same time as Garfield. They're calling it Furiosa, or I'm calling it that.
Yeah, that's better than what they're actually calling it, which is Gar Furiosa, which doesn't even work.
Furiosa. See this one first, because if you don't, we might not get The Wasteland.
Yeah, please. Tom Hardy's due to come back for that and everything. Like, there's going to be more Mad Max, but there's not going to be more Mad Max if you don't go and see it at the cinema, guys. Go see Furiosa. Go. Because, it is cinema. Is what it is, and I loved it. It was great.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, well, there you go. Well, it is time very quickly then for our Mad Max ranking. We now have all of the Mad Max films out, so it is time for us to do a definitive ranking. Would you like me to start, Nadine?
Yes, please.
My definitive ranking: number 1, Fury Road; number 2, Furiosa; number 3, The Road Warrior; number 4, Mad Max; number 5, Beyond Thunderdome; controversial, or basic?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on pretty much all of those.
Oh, really?
But I don't know. It's so hard choosing between Fury Road and Furiosa. They're so different. But you know what? I'm always a fan of character studies. And I think you get a lot more, even though Charlize's Furiosa is so iconic in Fury Road, I think I just love the world building of Furiosa just a little bit more. It's a bit more my kind of thing. So I'm going to go with Furiosa.
As number one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm going to go for Fury Road.
Okay. That's fine. We've still got the newest two in the top
Even though
two.
I prefer Charlize as Furiosa.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go for Beyond Thunderdome for my third one because it's just so bonkers.
It's just so much fun.
It's so bonkers. And just Tina Turner just does it for me.
Interesting. Okay.
And then Mad Max 2 and then Mad Max 1 at the end.
Right, okay.
Because even though I really appreciate what it did as an exploitation film, I just think the imagination of the following films is just so, it's what we think of when we think of Mad Max. So it's a world away from that. But, it's certainly got the ball rolling. But, yeah, if you disagree with our listings, do send us your own.
pictureshow@brumradio.com. Well, that was it for the Mad Max saga. We've discussed it. I mean, there's so much more we could have discussed about Mad Max. There's some fascinating tales to tell around that whole saga. But there we go. That's,
just like the films themselves.
Yes, exactly. But there we go. We've said some things.
Yeah.
So
if you disagree, feel free to send us that hate mail.
Yeah, we crave it. Well, that is about all we've got time for this Mad Max special this week. But we've just got time for Nadine's roundup of local news and events.
We've got some really exciting events coming up for Screen B14. So we're teaming up with the Mockingbird for the first time evs. So real cinema. And we're going to be showing some really rare and underseen films that you just can't get on streaming. So on the 10th of June at the Mockingbird, we'll be showing Todd Haynes' Safe, starring Julianne Moore. That's a really interesting sort of psychological horror movie. Definitely worth checking that out. On the 8th of July, we'll be showing Happy Together, a Wong Kar-wai film, a classic LGBT love story about two men in Argentina, starring Leslie Chung and Tony Leung Chiu-wai, two of the greatest Hong Kong actors ever. So definitely recommend checking out our Mockingbird screenings. Outside of that, we're showing Clueless at Cow Vintage Clothing in Digbeth on the 13th of June. And there'll be a Clueless-inspired clothing rail for you fashionistas out there. So check that out. And if you'd like to buy tickets for any of our events, do check out our socials at Screen B14. Outside of our screenings, Sturchley Open Cinema will be showing a relaxed screening of Secret of Kells on the 22nd of June at Sturchley Baths, and they'll be showing All of Us Strangers and Fabulous Femininities with Q&A on the 28th of June, and they are teaming up with Journey Film Club on that screening. And the Feckenodian will be showing Paul at the Feckenodian.
Me?
In not you, Paul, the movie Paul with the alien.
I was going to say, no one told me.
Yeah, that would have been exciting. But on the 19th of July, the Feckenodian will be showing Paul at the Feckenham Village Hall, not related to our Paul.
Thanks very much, Nadine. That's some very interesting stuff coming up indeed. That is it for this week's very exciting edition of the Brum Picture Show. It is goodbye from me, Paul.
It's goodbye from me, Nadine.
Goodbye.
Start your engines.
You have been listening to The Brum Picture Show, a Screen B14 production for Brum Radio. Tune in next time for more film fun, and don't forget to email us at pictureshow@brumradio.com. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Back to Black. Oh, by the way, Back to Black was okay.
Yeah, we thought it was all right.
I'm sorry. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this Brum Radio podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on your podcast app.